Greetings of the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the third edition of All in City Literature Fest, organized by SGR, Knowledge Foundation in association with GH Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. I am Khushi Agrawal, delighted to be an anchor for today's session, Modern Relationships Set Against the Backdrop of Mumbai and its Historical Milllands by Mrs. Rucha Chitrodia in conversation with Miss Priyanka Sharma. Rucha Chitrodia ma'am is author of the recently published novel It's Also About Mine. She has extensive journalistic experiences and is currently editor special reports with the Times of India, Mumbai. In her long career, she has written on financial, social, and cultural issues and also on food. A short story by her featured in the 2018 humor anthology Just Like That. She lives in Mumbai with her family. It's an honor to have you with us, Mrs. Rucha Chitrodia, ma'am. And this gets even more delighted as we have Mrs. Priyanka Sharma, ma'am, who will be in conversation with her as the moderator. Audience favorite speaker, Delight, Miss Priyanka Sharma is an acclaimed conversationalist and content consultant for promoting national dailies and corporate houses in central India. Not just that, she is also a soft skill coach with her primary areas of work in leadership, communication, and ethics, where she studies, trains, and authors in depth guides that assist people to manage and master their competence and intentions. Being a Generation Z author with her book's second edition to be out for public soon, she credits her versatile and illustrious experience record to her significant associations with renowned finishing schools, established education networks, schools, startups, corporates, and individuals. With 70 plus conferences, keynotes, and public communication, she has to her credit 3,000 plus hours of training at a very young age. For she believes that to imbue people with correct theories may make them choose their goals and means wisely so as to avoid the roads that end in terrific disappointment. It's a pleasure to have you to join us today, ma'am. Once again welcome you, Rucha ma'am, and I welcome you, Priyanka ma'am. Also, before moving ahead, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the support of Amalys's Manjul publication as an association in this valuable in OCLF. Now, my dear audience, you are about to experience a conversation between two very dynamic individuals. So, without skipping a moment, I humbly invite Mrs. Priyanka ma'am to lead us ahead.
Thank you, Kushi. That was quite a generous introduction for both of us. I welcome you, Rucha ma'am, again. It's a delight to be having you with us today, and I am absolutely excited to be extending my moderation for such an intriguing discussion over a book that earned this quote by first post. It's also about my It's a coming of age narrative that unfolds through the eponymous, experiences of living in the old mill district of Mumbai and of the hard truths about adulting that she must learn along the way. So my first thought that came to my mind when I read about this and the narratives was, how did you come up with this book?
See, I wanted to capture the lives of people, both regular and irregular, and mostly irregular because that's becoming more mainstream now than regular, at the micro level, alongside the larger social context of a particular place and time. So, in this case, Mumbai and the economically and socially valuable age of its former textile mills industry, which its clangor strident at first and then deafeningly silent following the unexpectedly unending labor strike of the 1980s. So, yeah, so I just wanted to map the entire history of the milllands alongside a story of regular people, which is not, which doesn't really end up as a regular kind of a story because everybody goes through their own journey. So it's like a dual kind of thread which runs alongside.
Makes sense, ma'am. So, do you think that the former textile mill lands have had a lasting impression on the cultural landscape of Mumbai? Like,
Okay, I would like
that's
to answer this by reading from a chapter to capture the
please, ma'am.
flavor and sounds and smells of the former mill district and how it actually infused into the entire cityscape. So just a
Please.
second, this is my book. It's also
Mm-hmm.
mine. Yeah, let's read the chapter. I'll read something very specific to the Midlands because the question was specifically about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Krishna could not hear his neighbors while crouching in the sole uncluttered corner of his one-room home that resembled a discarded doll house with its grey walls. Now, Krishna is a former mill worker. His face was an ashen, leathery grid of strife, and his legs spindly knobs as he sat on his haunches. His bony hands were placed lightly on his knees. His roomy, one second, his roomy eyes were yellowed, and his hearing was a mournful reminiscence. As a boy, he could hear as well as anyone around him. The constant roar of machines in the 2 decades he had spent in the spinning department of a textile mill had ruptured his eardrums. He now responded to mime while living out his silent days. He would often think of his first few years in the big city, sleeping in a single room with 20 textile workers, with no space to even turn. But Krishna, who had a happy constitution and for whom life was a string of moments that held no greater significance than his experience of them, never let himself forget that he was among the privileged who had a room to sleep in. His friends and colleagues from the Konkan and the Ghat regions of Maharashtra and others from the states of Uttar Pradesh up north and Tamil Nadu and Telangana down south spent their nights on the road outside, waiting for a vacancy to crop up inside. He worked 3 shifts. On his way to work and back, he would be invigorated by the typical smells and sounds, cooking of food and crackling of masala from the community kitchens, the pleasurably suffocating odor of roasting of tobacco and frying of dried fish from homes, shout outs of vendors of onion, garlic, arecanut, and multicolored glass bangles, and smoke of lit biddies. If at home in the afternoon, his siesta would be broken by raucous jugglers with topi wearing monkeys. Krishna's favorite, though, was the bioscope man, permanently stationed next to his regular tea stall. The contraption's primitive manual projector boasted 5 viewing rounds that allowed him a deco at electric bulb lit color reels and frames of foremost tourist hotspots and movie stars. He would avidly await performances of myriad art forms that grew around him. Naman that would start with a prayer and a bow, the Dashavtar theatre of epics, and the devotional Bharut and Lalit. Some evenings, Krishna would land up to watch the rustic Baurangi Tamasha performances at Hanuman Theatre, one of the 6 near his shop. He would nod along as on stage men and women dressed in 9 yard zari saris and loaded with heavy jewelry and makeup would sing, dance, and intersperse their act with unscripted dialogue in simple language that he grasped and appreciated. Folk plays would be performed on temporary stages set up on cordoned off streets. Between the acts of plays, political speeches would be made after the speakers were received effusively with thunderous claps and firecrackers. The vibrancy that mill workers lent to their social lives seeped into the cultural ethos of the city. I think I'll just end at that because I don't want to give too much away also. Yeah.
No, you could go on and on.
Yeah.
I would request you if you may please the last sentence again. I loved it when you said the vibrancy that they lent,
Hmm.
transfused into the ethos of Mumbai. I would like to listen in one more time, please.
Okay.
Yes.
One second. Now again, it'll take me some time to open.
No problem, ma'am. I think when you were speaking about it, I could picturize a lot of the narrative that you were saying. I think that's so breathable, imaginable, and at the very, I think, very honest, to be very honest.
Thank
Honest, to
you.
be very
Just
honest.
the last line. The vibrancy that mill workers lend to their social life.
Sorry, wherever you can begin would be okay.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I want to listen the last line. Wherever you want to start with, that's your choice.
Folk plays would be performed on temporary stages, set up on cordoned off streets. Between the acts of plays, political speeches would be made after the speakers were received effusively with thunderous claps and firecrackers. The vibrancy that mill workers lent to their social lives seeped into the cultural ethos of the city. That's it. I mean, I could go on.
I think, ma'am, it's a no, but I personally really liked how you've pulled the strings together to make a narrative that even if a person has no idea with, can relate on a very deeper level with them. For an example, so when you're narrating the incidents, but at the same time when you're telling how it has impacted something, it doesn't feel alien to me. I'm getting where it is coming from. So I personally enjoyed this. I had a few places where I was completely, but this one totally had me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So these stories, the central character, her father, and landlady run parallels to the story of the city. Why mill area is the central to the plot? Why this only?
See, what happened in the mill areas was perhaps the first example of disruption, a word used ad nauseum today, considering the revolutionary impact of internet on life as we know it, especially after the pandemic. If not at the current speed of light, of course. But my book is an attempt to look at the impact of disruption in each character's journey, juxtaposed against the fate of the city's mills and its aftermath. So the disruption in the mill lands, which the entire textile mill industry was one day operational, and one fine day, everything just ended. There were like locks on there were padlocks on the gates, and they never really opened up. So the central character of Maina, for one, would not have moved into Lalbagh and got a job in Parel, both of which are former mill hubs. Lalbagh is also one of the mill hubs. Parel is one of the mill hubs. And she wouldn't have moved in there if not for the labor strike and the parceling off of land in these two erstwhile central Mumbai mill districts to the real estate industry. Now, the land would not have been repurposed to make way for residential high rises because she lived in Lalbagh and corporate offices, which are like everywhere, but she worked in Parel. If the mills were still functional, if they were still operational. So it's just it's like when you're writing two stories and somehow they come together because it's all happening in the same place, and now it's no longer the same mill lands because everything has changed. So yeah, so mapping the disruption was one of the key reasons why I wrote the story also, because disruption happens at a lot of levels, at the personal level and at a larger social and political level also. So it's like a very continuous part of life. Yeah.
It does. I think it also redefined, like you said, not only the story but the character arcs also, and everything that has to do with
because we are also defined by the places we live in. We don't live in a vacuum. Yeah.
True. So it's all interconnected.
So you'll be a different, you'll have a different set of social mores. The way I'm from Mumbai, so I'll be going for life a little differently. Topography, everything makes sense. Yeah.
It does contribute. I think I agree to it, and it makes now it does actually make me realize how it's just not a place where it is against the backdrop of. It is also the primary reason why it starts, develops, and ultimately makes rooms to our hearts. Ultimately. So yes, having said that, while there are three central characters, there are almost cameo-like appearances by several others. So why did you feel the need of so many characters to be introduced in the story?
So this book is as much about the central characters as about the city. As I was saying, there are two stories which are playing side by side, alongside. They come together. Sometimes they, go their own. Again, they come. It's like a mix. So if it is as much about the central characters as it is about the city, I feel a story of a city can only be told through its people and not static structures or even vibrant institutions for that matter. Yeah. So a majority of the mill workers were migrants from Maharashtra and elsewhere in the country. Now, during my research for the book, it spilled over from the mill areas to other parts of the city and homelands of other migrants that make the city, to use a cliche, the melting pot that it is famously known as. Actually, it's not a cliche; it is a fact. You know. So
It's a
while the
fact.
book
It's a fact.
is predominantly about the mill lands, it is not limited to it. So the numerous characters that come and go reflect the city's crowded matrix. So I think
Right.
they were also pretty important to the story.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Reflects the city's crowded matrix.
Yeah.
I think every time you're saying something, I'm just picking up on them. They're so fresh and so well put. So,
Thank
okay, that also makes sense that there are cameo-like appearances because you feel that there has to be, that is the best way to tell a story about a city. So now this is a coming of an age story that takes a look at formless modern relationships. Would you like to expound on it since it is primarily one of the themes that focuses in the book,
Yes.
that is focused in the book?
So Maina, the protagonist, she has been ghosted by her boyfriend in Bombay when she
Okay.
lands here. She's from Bengaluru and she comes here, and then her father is also single. Her landlady is single. So basically, there are three very lonely people. Now, all three have faced disruption. Again, I'm using disruption word all the time because I mean it's become very mainstream. So all three have
Yeah.
faced disruption of some form in their lives. So at some point, the three of them come together in the landlady's Lalbagh flat. Now they form a
Mm-hmm.
kinship, a kind of a family that has no name in the classical and legal sense of the word. But
Mm-hmm.
it can be stated without any doubt that the three of them come to function like a unit. You know, there is some sort of a friendship which has formed among the three of them, and there is no paperwork involved. There is no legal obligation, and yet they are one. So I feel that they have sort of come out. They have just sort of formed a new. Um, at some point, probably such relationships will need some name too. But at this point, they're just like happy being one, and they do things like a regular family would. They go for movies, which is like mentioned in passing, and they start doing things that any normal family would do, and without there being any
Right.
real, you know,
Mm-hmm.
some sort of a
Mm-hmm.
format or them
Mm-hmm.
fitting into any known social modes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's a very it's an encouraging idea to look at these relationships from perspective of your book because a lot of people do not have the courage to accept that certain times, like you said, we work as a unit and it does not necessarily need to have a label or a classification of a particular bond. But
Yeah.
that makes sense, ma'am. And would you like to say something more on it?
No, it's just that I feel that friendship is the number. Friendship is, I think, above a lot of relationships because I,
Relationships.
that too. I mean, there is again no paperwork involved, right? So these are basically three
Mm-hmm.
friends. You can also call them roommates. I mean, it's father and daughter, of course, that is there. They're very close. And this woman who is like
Right.
single, she's divorced, and she has no one really to call her own. And somehow they all become one. And that I think is a very
Mm-hmm.
happy situation to be in because it's a voluntary relationship. There is nothing really bringing them together or keeping them together except
Mm-hmm.
their fondness for one another. And we don't even
Makes
know
sense,
whether
ma'am.
tomorrow, there may be a marriage in the offing, or we don't know. And I don't think that's even important or critical.
Right, right,
It's not
right, right.
important. They're just happy and they're very gentle, easy people, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
living with each other and they're okay.
I think that is something that I personally also feel that your characters are complete in their own sense. So whatever happens to them is complementary, is something that will add to them, but does not necessarily have to be essential or supporting. To be very honest, कि ये जरूरी है. Yeah, this should happen. If it happens, it's great. If it doesn't, still it would be fine. It's a complete story. It's a complete character. They have their own journeys. So I think, yes, that is something that I have. So I have few questions which are relative to how this journey of book writing was for you. So what was the best part about writing this particular story? What was something that you really enjoyed doing? Was it the beginning phase, or when it all came together in a little skeleton, or was it once it was in your hands, the manuscript or the print?
See, the journey, of course, at some point when you feel a little because there are so many threads in this, and to put it all together, so that was like quite enjoyable because it was a little challenging also at some point. So when I would
Yes.
just end up like what should I say, connecting the dots, I think in that story when the macro everything came together, that I think was the high point more than getting the manuscript. So yeah, for me the journey was, and even the research, and I went and met all the mill workers progeny sort of, and I went to those areas, I looked around, I soaked in everything. So uh, though it is fiction, it is very much based in the temporal space. It's a very real book. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that entire process of going, meeting people, seeing the, and then putting it all in, and then giving it a fictional kind of a phase was something that I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed. Yeah. And it was a, yeah,
And
it
what?
was, yeah. Sorry, and
Please, ma'am.
no, no, no,
Please.
no, I don't even
Okay,
have
I was
to.
just asking.
Yeah.
I was just continuing. What was the most kindest review, compliment, feedback, or anything while your experience, while you were researching for it, or even when you must have shared with people that you're planning to write something like this over this theme, or with the against the backdrop of mill area. What was the most wholesome compliment or feedback you received, or you remember?
It's the feedback basically came after the book came out. Before that, I mean, I think writing is a very private experience. So, I mean, I wasn't sharing, what was really, because it is a very, it wasn't a very easy process, the book, because it was
Mm-hmm.
different, and as there were like so many characters involved, and to put it all together in a fiction which is like readable, and it shouldn't get too overwhelming. So I wasn't
True.
really sharing too much, but after the book came out, and then the reception has been quite okay. And some things, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like you get a mix, but yeah, I mean, some people say that the mill lands have come alive, and you get to
Oh.
experience. I think that has been the kindest, yeah.
I think even I had the same experience when I was reading the reviews and I was looking at the backdrop of what it was. To me, it was, like I said at the very beginning, it is an unusual topic. You do not come across people who have a central idea against a geographical context. People have characters. They do have characters. They have historical references, but there are very few books which are against a particular geography, and then bring, and like you said, it might have a fictional aspect to it, but it is based very much onto the real
Yeah,
people, on the
then,
real
yeah, yeah.
like I said, geography, relationships, all of that. So okay, having said that as well, now that you mentioned that there are characters also, one question I personally have, apart from the central character, which is your favorite character, which character you enjoyed most while writing?
I liked a person who might be called a villain in the classical sense, but I was very, I mean, there's one character I was really drawn to, that is a woman called Harsha. And she
Okay.
is supposed to be, she's like those power women, and it's like my
Mm-hmm.
way or the highway kind of a person. And yeah, like not too many people like her, but she's like very successful. And she has her own backstory,
Mm-hmm.
like how she was not treated very well as a kid, and she was seen as a very ugly kid, and how she basically overcame that and started wearing her ugliness as a badge. So she
Mm-hmm.
was so confident. At some point she becomes so confident, and she gets this guy
Mm-hmm.
who's like such a very sought after corporate kind of a one corporate honcho kind of a fellow. And
Mm-hmm.
she sort of makes a success of her life despite being a
Mm-hmm.
child who nobody wants. Her mother had sent her off to a boarding school, and she, I mean, it's like just when you take the positives that way, in her case, it's like taking the negatives, and how she overcomes that. That I thought was And obviously she'll be tough, and obviously she won't be very nice to everybody around her, because that's the only language she has heard since she's a kid. A child who's grown up with so much negativity around. I mean, how do you expect that kid to really face the world as a grown up? So yeah, she's been my
Actually.
favorite. Yeah, like a lot of people have hated her, but I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for her. Yeah.
I think even we will start to root for the character now that we've understood what was your perspective while, creating her and then drawing her character sketch. So, as we are approaching the end, just one question that I can't possibly skip out on is, are there other books on the card? If there are, what are they about? Are we having a sequel for this one?
No, I just have one very different book from this coming up. It's a domestic or a household kind of a thriller. And
Oh.
yeah. So it's a thriller with very, very few characters. Unlike it's also about minor. So yeah, it's also based in Bombay. That's the only commonality.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the only dates we have. But honestly, Rucha ma'am, I really liked how you said you're a debut writer, but at the same time, the kind of characters you've chosen, the kind of narratives you've decided to take upon. Then there is a history, then there is a little geography, then there is a lot of emotions. So I think personally, it would be an enjoyable journey and a delight for any reader. And like I said, we will root for your characters because now we also understand where they're coming from. So thank you for weaving this beautiful book for us. And
Thank you so
like
much,
I said,
Priyanka.
everybody, I just hope that people do reach out to you because most of the times, most of the writers that I speak with, they always say that, yeah, we get the reviews, but I really wish people to reach out to you to tell you how much, whether they enjoy, how much they feel relative with it, and what do they have as a feedback. So thank you for joining us, Rucha ma'am. It was
Thank you so much,
absolutely an honor to be doing this for you.
Yeah, it's been an honor for me also.
Thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Rucha ma'am. Thank you,
Thank
Priyanka ma'am.
you.
Listening to you, Rucha ma'am and Priyanka ma'am in a conversation felt like a different kind of psychological experience for me. Because it is very true that when an author writes, it has to be a psychological experience for them because they are the one who feels each and every character. Like you told about the girl Harsha, you must have felt like, okay, she went to boarding school. Like you have psychologically studied her to understand that, okay, she is going to be a main character in my book. And it is very commendable for a reader to, when you listen to an author saying that, I personally like the villain because you know their psychological experience. You know from the place where they're coming from. It was a pleasure for me. The whole story, the whole narrative was like mind-blowing. But this, when you said that your villain is your favorite character, just blew me away. Like your thinking blew me away. Ma'am. At the outset, I would like to thank Ms. Rucha Chitrodia ma'am and Ms. Priyanka Sharma ma'am for joining us today. We wish and we really wish to hear from you again and again. And we will be equally enlightened as we all are all today. And for my dear, massive, lovely audience, I am sure that after witnessing this conversation, you are all taking home an enriched version of yourself. I'm sure I will. Thank you for joining us today. Until I see you again, this is Khushi Agrawal signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Khushi. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So I'll
to Rise Group, a vision beyond.